Commander Ethan Miller stood frozen on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant. The diplomatic meeting with the Krellin Empire had just ended in blood and screams. What was supposed to be a peaceful first contact had turned into a massacre in seconds. "Sir, we need to leave now," shouted his pilot, frantically working the controls. "Their ships are powering weapons." Miller watched through the view screen as the 8-foot-tall reptilian aliens dragged away the bodies of his team. Ambassador Frank White had only extended his hand, a simple human greeting. The Krellins had seen it as a threat display. Now White and 4 others were dead. "Get us out of here," Miller ordered, his voice steady despite the horror he felt. The Defiant shot away from the Krellin mothership, engines straining. 3 Krellin fighters gave chase. The Defiant shook as enemy fire struck its shields. "Evasive pattern Delta," Miller commanded. "And pull up that recording. We need proof of what happened." As the ship ducked and weaved through space, Miller watched the footage again. Just before the Krellins attacked, he noticed something he'd missed in the chaos: the alien leader reviewing human military files on a screen. This wasn't a misunderstanding. The Krellins had planned this. "Sir, I'm picking up transmissions," said Communications Officer Lisa Ryan. They're organizing an invasion fleet. They're coming to Earth." Miller's blood ran cold. In the transmissions, he could hear the Krellin War Master speaking to his commanders. "These humans are soft creatures. Weak. Primitive. They will make excellent slaves, those we allow to live." The Defiant barely escaped the solar system, taking damage but staying ahead of the pursuers. Miller knew he carried the most important message in human history. 3 weeks later, Admiral Susan Grant stood before the Earth Defense Council in the Underground Command Center in Colorado. The room was silent as the footage from the Defiant played on the main screen. "That's all we have," Grant said when it ended. Commander Miller's ship limped home with this warning: "The Krellin invasion fleet will reach our solar system in approximately 2 months." "What are our options?" asked the President, her face grim. Grant nodded to her team. "I've assembled our best people. Major Derek Hudson, our top tactical officer. Dr. Laura Penn, xenobiologist who's been studying the limited data we have on Krellin physiology. And Agent Olivia Reyes, psychological warfare specialist." Major Hudson stepped forward. He was a stocky man with calculating eyes. "The Krellins outgun us 10-1. Their ships are faster, their weapons more advanced. They've conquered 12 other species according to their own records. So we're doomed," said the Defense Secretary. "No," Hudson replied. "We have one advantage. They think we're weak." Dr. Penn joined him at the front of the room. "The Krellins evolved from apex predators. Their society is built on strict hierarchy and honor codes. They expect us to fight like they do, with direct confrontation and standard tactics." Agent Reyes smiled slightly. "But that's not how humans fight when we're outmatched. We get creative. We improvise. We break rules." Admiral Grant pulled up the defense plans on the main screen. "We've been preparing since the Defiant returned. Retrofitting mining ships with weapons, setting traps in the asteroid belt, training civilian pilots for guerrilla tactics." "Will it be enough?" asked the President. Commander Miller, who had been quiet until now, spoke up from his seat. "They think we're easy prey. That might be the only advantage we have." He stood, still bearing the scars from his escape. "But there's something the Krellins don't understand about humans. When backed into a corner, we don't surrender. We become more dangerous than anyone expects." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Very well," said the President finally. "Implement the defense plan. And may God help us all." As the meeting ended, Admiral Grant caught up with Miller in the hallway. "Get some rest, Commander. In 2 days, you ship out to the Jupiter defensive line." Miller nodded. Earth would be ready. The Krellins had no idea what they were about to face. Captain Nora Wells looked out from the command deck of Space Station Artemis. The massive structure floated in orbit around Jupiter, humanity's first line of defense. 2 months had passed since Commander Miller's warning, and now radar showed the first wave of Krellan ships approaching. "Status report," Wells called out, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. "All mining ships in position," replied Lieutenant Sam Rogers. "Civilian vessels are acting as decoys near the moons. Defense platforms online and ready." Wells nodded. The plan seemed crazy, but Major Hudson had insisted it would work. The Krellans expected a traditional defense, warships in formation, direct confrontation. Instead, they would find a web of traps and tricks. "Message from the lead Krellan ship," announced the communications officer. "They're demanding our immediate surrender." Wells smiled. "Send them our response." On the screen, 3 simple words appeared: "Come and get us." The first Krellan ships entered the Jupiter system with confidence. Their scanner showed only scattered resistance, some primitive space stations, mining vessels, and small fighter craft. Their commander, Submaster Vreek, laughed at the pathetic human defense. "Move to standard conquest formation," he ordered. "Target their largest station first." The Krellan battleships moved forward into Jupiter's rings, unaware of what waited there. Suddenly, alarms blared across their bridge. "Detecting multiple small objects," shouted a Krellan officer. Too late. Hundreds of mines, hidden among the ice and rock of Jupiter's rings, activated at once. Explosions rippled across the Krellan front line. 3 battleships erupted in flames, their hulls torn apart. 2 more spun out of control, their engines destroyed. "Impossible," roared Submaster Vreek. "These humans have no such technology." "Sir, the mines appear to be modified from mining explosives," reported his science officer. "They've adapted industrial equipment into weapons." Vreek snarled in fury. "Launch fighters. Destroy their station." The second wave of Krellan ships released hundreds of fighter craft. They formed perfect attack formations, just as they had been trained for centuries of warfare. But as they approached Artemis Station, something unexpected happened. Human ships, tiny compared to Krellan vessels, shot out from hiding places among Jupiter's moons. They flew in patterns that made no sense, breaking every rule of space combat. The Krellan pilots, used to enemies who followed predictable tactics, couldn't adjust fast enough. "What are they doing?" demanded a Krellan squad leader as he watched a human pilot fly directly toward a much larger Krellan ship, only to roll away at the last second, dropping explosives that attached to the enemy hull. Another human ship spun in seemingly random directions, drawing Krellan fire while 3 others attacked from below. Everywhere, human vessels performed maneuvers that the Krellan's battle computers classified as suicidal yet effective. On Artemis, Captain Wells watched the battle unfold. Her retrofitted mining ships were causing havoc, their industrial cutting lasers slicing through Krellan fighter craft. The civilian vessels, volunteered by their pilots, drew enemy fire away from actual combat ships. "Station hit," called out her damage control officer as the whole structure shook. "Sections 12 through 15 are damaged. Redirect power to shields," Wells ordered. "And tell Squad 7 to hit that battleship from below." In his command ship at the rear of the fleet, War Master Thraz received the disturbing reports. Half of his first attack force destroyed, and for what? They had barely damaged the human defenses. "These humans," he hissed to his second-in-command, "they do not fight according to any recognizable doctrine." "Perhaps they are too primitive to know better," suggested his officer. Thraz's scales darkened with anger. "No, this is deliberate. They knew we would expect standard tactics, so they chose chaos instead." He stared at the battle displays, watching another Krellan ship explode. "Order all ships to pull back and regroup. We must reconsider our approach." As the Krellan forces retreated from Jupiter, Captain Wells allowed herself a small smile. The first test of humanity's unusual defense had succeeded, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Send word to Earth," she told her communications officer. "Tell them the Krellans are still coming. but now they're confused. Major Derek Hudson stood in the Mars Colony Command Center, surrounded by screens showing the approaching Krellan fleet. After their defeat at Jupiter, the aliens had regrouped and changed their tactics. Now they moved more carefully, scanning for traps, keeping their formations loose. "They're learning," Hudson said to Dr. Laura Penn and Agent Olivia Reyes, who stood next to him. "But we can use that against them." Dr. Penn nodded. "My team has analyzed their communication patterns. The Krellans use a strict chain of command. All orders come from the top down." "Perfect," said Agent Reyes with a small smile. "That's their weakness. Time for Operation Nightmare." Governor Alan Carter of Mars Colony looked nervous. "You want us to do what?" "Send them thousands of individual messages," Reyes explained patiently. "Jokes, riddles, song lyrics, random facts, anything confusing." "But why?" Carter asked. Hudson stepped forward. "Because their translation systems are designed for formal military communication. We'll overwhelm them with human unpredictability." Carter shook his head, but gave the order. As the Krellan ships approached Mars, they received not one official communication channel, but thousands of individual signals from colonists, miners, and soldiers. On the Krellan command ship, War Master Thraz stared in disbelief at the communication officer, whose scales had turned pale with stress. "What do you mean, you can't translate them?" Thraz demanded. "The humans are sending too many messages," the officer explained. "Each one is different. Listen to this one. Why did the chicken cross the road? And this one is just singing about someone named Jolene taking someone's man. This one keeps repeating, 'All your base are belong to us.'" Thraz hissed in frustration. "Ignore them. Focus on their defense systems." But the communication flood was just the beginning. As the Krellan fleet moved into attack position, small human ships appeared from behind Phobos and Deimos, Mars moons. Instead of flying in formation, each ship moved in seemingly random patterns. "They're not coordinating," said Thraz's tactical officer. "They're just flying chaotically." Suddenly, the chaotic movements stopped. The human ships turned as one and attacked from multiple directions at once. Several Krellan vessels took heavy damage before they could respond. "How?" roared Thraz. "How did they coordinate without communications?" What the Krellans didn't know was that the humans were using timing and pre-planned maneuvers, not real-time communications that could be intercepted. Meanwhile, Agent Reyes and her special team worked in a hidden facility on Phobos. They had spent weeks studying Krellan communication frequencies and encryption. "We're in," Reyes said as her screen showed access to the Krellan battle network. "Ready the package." Throughout the Krellan fleet, ship commanders suddenly found their tactical displays replaced by human music. Specifically chosen heavy metal and classical pieces blasted through Krellan communication systems at full volume. On the bridge of his ship, a Krellan captain ripped off his audio receiver as Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries screamed through the speakers. "Shut it off," he ordered, but his crew couldn't override the hack. The humans used the confusion to press their attack. Mars defense platforms fired precisely at Krellan weak points, while ground-based missiles launched from hidden silos on the planet's surface. Back on the command ship, War Master Thraz struggled to regain control of his fleet. "This is not warfare," he snarled. "This is madness." His second-in-command looked troubled. "Sir, we've lost 22 ships. We need to pull back." Thraz's scales darkened with rage. "No, I want prisoners. I want humans to study. We must understand how they think if we are to defeat them." As the Krellan forces retreated from Mars, they launched special pods toward the human outposts on Phobos. Inside these pods were elite Krellan hunters with one mission: capture humans alive. In the Mars Command Center, Hudson received the warning too late. "Reyes, get your team out of there," he shouted into the comm. But on his screen, he could already see Krellan boarding craft attaching to the Phobos facility where Reyes and her team were working. "We've got company," Reyes said calmly over the comm. "Don't worry. We'll handle it. The link went dead as the first Krellin hunters broke through the facility doors. Lieutenant Jack Summers woke up inside a cold metal cell. His head throbbed, and the last thing he remembered was the Krellin boarding party breaking into the reconnaissance outpost on Phobos. He looked around and saw Sergeant Maria Diaz unconscious on the floor nearby. "Maria," he whispered, shaking her gently. "Wake up." Diaz opened her eyes slowly. "Where are we?" "Krellin's ship, I think," Summers replied. "Looks like they wanted prisoners after all." A harsh scraping sound made them both turn toward the cell door. It slid open to reveal two Krellin guards, their scales dark green and shimmering under the lights. Behind them stood a smaller Krellin in a white covering. "The specimens are awake," said the smaller Krellin. "Bring them to the lab." The guards grabbed Summers and Diaz roughly and dragged them down a long corridor. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air smelled like sulfur. They entered a large room filled with equipment and tables. "I am Chief Scientist Zex," said the smaller Krellin. "You humans have caused much trouble. Now we will learn your weaknesses." Over the next several days, the Krellins conducted tests on the two humans. They measured their strength, tested their reflexes, and observed their responses to different environments. To the aliens' surprise, the humans showed remarkable adaptability. "Interesting," Zex noted when Summers performed well in a high-gravity test. "They are physically weaker than us, yet they can function in conditions outside their norm." What puzzled the Krellins most was the humans' behavior in captivity. Despite their situation, Summers and Diaz would often talk to each other, and sometimes even laugh. "Why do you make that noise?" Zex asked after hearing Diaz laugh at something Summers said. "It's called humor," Diaz replied. "Something funny happens, we laugh." "Nothing here is funny," Zex said. "You are prisoners." Summers smiled. "Humans can find humor in almost any situation. It helps us cope." Zex made notes on his tablet. Bizarre psychological response. What the Krellins didn't realize was that Summers and Diaz were gathering intelligence while pretending to cooperate. They memorized the ship's layout during transfers between the lab and their cell. They noted the guards' rotation schedules. They learned about Krellin technology by watching the scientists work. Tonight, Summers whispered to Diaz as they were returned to their cell. "They're getting careless. The night shift only has 2 guards instead of 4. Diaz nodded slightly. "I'll create the distraction." Later that night, Diaz began moaning loudly and clutching her stomach. "Help!" Summers called out. "Something's wrong with her." A guard opened the cell door, and Zex hurried in with a medical scanner. "What is happening?" Zex demanded. Diaz suddenly went limp, appearing to lose consciousness. As Zex leaned closer to examine her, Summers grabbed the scientist's tablet and smashed it against the guard's head. In the same motion, Diaz sprang up and tackled Zex. "The other guard will be here soon," Summers said, grabbing the stunned guard's weapon. "Let's move." They ran through the corridors, using the knowledge they had gained during their captivity. When they reached the shuttle bay, Diaz quickly figured out the basic controls of a small Krellin transport vessel. "Can you fly this thing?" Summers asked as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Not well," Diaz replied with a grim smile. "But well enough." The shuttle bay doors opened as security forces burst in, firing their weapons. The small transport shot out into space, wobbling slightly as Diaz adjusted to the controls. "Head for the Mars defensive line," Summers said, "and hope they don't shoot us down before they realize we're human." As their stolen shuttle fled toward Mars, War Master Thraz received the report of their escape. "How?" he demanded. "How did they overcome armed guards with no weapons?" "We don't know, sir," his officer replied. "But they also downloaded our ship schematics and weapons specifications before they left." Thraz's scales turned almost black with fury. "These humans are more dangerous than we imagined." Back at Earth Command, Admiral Grant received the unexpected news. 2 captured humans had not only escaped but brought back valuable intelligence on Krellin ship design and technology. They still don't understand what they're dealing with, she said grimly. Let's show them. Dr. Kevin Wright hadn't slept in 3 days. His lab at the Lunar Research Facility was filled with pieces of Krellin technology collected from destroyed ships. Scattered across tables were alien power cores, weapon fragments, and bits of hull material. Coffee cups littered every surface. I think I've got it, he said to his team of engineers. The Krellin shields operate on a fixed frequency. That's why they're so strong against direct attacks. A young engineer named Lily Chen looked up from her workstation. But if we create weapons that change frequency? Exactly, Wright said with a tired smile. Their shields won't know what to block. All across Earth and its colonies, humans worked around the clock to adapt Krellin technology. What had taken the aliens centuries to develop, humans were modifying in weeks. More importantly, they were using the tech in ways the Krellins never imagined. At a testing range on the far side of the moon, Wright and his team demonstrated their newest creation to Admiral Grant. We call it the Shield Breaker, Wright explained, pointing to a small missile. It emits a modulated frequency that confuses Krellin shields, then delivers an electromagnetic pulse that shuts down their systems. Why didn't the Krellins develop this themselves? Grant asked. Because it's considered dishonorable in their culture, answered Dr. Penn, who had joined the demonstration. They believe in direct confrontation, not trickery. Their honor code limited their weapons development. Grant nodded. And we have no such limitations. Meanwhile, in a large hangar at the lunar base, Colonel Patricia Winters supervised Special Forces training. The teams practiced in a full-sized replica of a Krellin ship interior, built using the schematics that Summers and Dias had brought back. Remember, the Krellins have blind spots at the top of their vision. Winters instructed her soldiers. Their hearing is sensitive to high frequencies but poor at detecting low ones. Use that. The teams moved through the mock ship, practicing boarding actions. Some soldiers carried modified weapons that could interface with Krellin systems. Others specialized in using the aliens' own security measures against them. They expect enemies to attack head-on, Winters said. So we'll come from directions they don't watch. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, the first human Krellin hybrid vessels were nearing completion. They looked nothing like traditional human ships or Krellin vessels. They were smaller, more agile, and incorporated technology from both species in new ways. Fleet Captain Chris Bailey inspected the lead ship, named the Trickster. She's ugly, said his executive officer. But she'll work, Bailey replied. The Krellins designed their ships for power and intimidation. We designed ours to be overlooked until it's too late. The Trickster and her sister ships had reverse-engineered Krellin weapons but human control systems. They could mask their energy signatures to appear as debris or small asteroids. Most importantly, they could coordinate in ways the rigid Krellin battle doctrine never considered. Back in his flagship, War Master Thraz received increasingly disturbing reports. The humans had not collapsed after their defeats. Instead, they were adapting, learning, evolving their tactics. The High Command demands results. His second-in-command reminded him, we must attack their main world soon. The High Command does not understand these humans, Thraz replied. They do not think like any species we have encountered before. But orders were orders. Thraz began planning a major assault on Earth's moon, the main staging area for human defenses. With overwhelming force, he would crush their resistance once and for all. Unknown to Thraz, this was exactly what the humans wanted. Admiral Grant and her team had transformed the moon not just into a fortress, but into a trap. All teams report ready, Major Hudson told Grant in the Lunar Command Center. The reverse-engineered weapons are in place. Colonel Winters' boarding teams are standing by. Captain Bailey's hybrid fleet is hidden in position. Grant nodded, her face serious. Then we're ready. When the Krellins come for our moon, they'll find we're not the prey they expected. As the massive Krellin fleet began its approach to lunar orbit, human forces waited silently. The counterattack was about to begin. War Master Thraz watched from his command ship as the Krellin Armada approached Earth's moon. 500 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled for a single target, moved in perfect formation. This time, there would be no clever human tricks, no surprising escapes. This time, overwhelming force would crush their resistance. "Begin the attack," Thraz ordered. "Target their main base first." Krellin gunships fired at the lunar surface, sending explosions across the gray landscape. Defense towers on the moon returned fire, but seemed to cause little damage to the Krellin ships. "Too easy," murmured Thraz's second-in-command. "Yes," Thraz replied, his scales darkening with suspicion. "Too easy indeed." Inside the Lunar Command Center, Major Hudson watched the Krellin fleet on the main screen. Beside him, Admiral Grant gave a slight nod. "Now," Hudson ordered. Across the lunar surface, hidden doors opened in the gray dust. Launch tubes that had been invisible to Krellin scanners suddenly revealed themselves. Hundreds of the new shield-breaker missiles shot upward toward the enemy fleet. "What is this?" roared a Krellin commander as the missiles approached his ship. "Shields at maximum." But the missiles changed frequency as they flew, confusing the Krellin defensive systems. They passed through the shields as if they weren't there. Instead of exploding, the missiles attached to the hulls and released powerful electromagnetic pulses. Ship after ship lost power, their systems overloaded. "Now, Bailey," Grant said into her comm. "Strike." In the darkness of space, what had appeared to be debris and small asteroids suddenly came to life. Captain Bailey's hybrid fleet, hidden in plain sight, activated their engines and weapons. The small, agile ships darted between the larger Krellin vessels, targeting engines and weapons systems with precision. They were waiting for us, Thraz realized with growing horror. This was a trap. On the lunar surface, Krellin landing ships deposited thousands of ground troops. They expected to find humans hiding in bunkers. Instead, they found soldiers in powered armor suits specifically designed for lunar combat. Colonel Winters led her troops from the front lines. "Remember your training," she told them over the comm. "Use the low gravity to your advantage." Human soldiers made impossible leaps, jumping hundreds of feet across the lunar surface to outflank the Krellins. They used the moon's fine dust to blind alien sensors. Most effectively, they appeared and disappeared using a network of underground tunnels that crisscrossed beneath the battlefield. A Krellin ground commander tried to organize his troops to respond, but the humans refused to fight in any recognizable pattern. They struck from all directions, retreated before the Krellins could counterattack, then appeared somewhere else entirely. "Where are they coming from?" the commander shouted as another squad reported being ambushed. In orbit, Bailey's strike force approached the Krellin flagship. His ship, the Trickster, was tiny compared to the massive alien vessel, but that was the point. The Krellins focused their defenses on larger threats, ignoring what they considered insignificant. "Boarding teams ready," Bailey said, watching as his ship slipped past the flagship's outer defenses. "Prepare to attach." Special teams trained by Colonel Winters deployed from the Trickster, using the technology and tactics developed over the past weeks. They cut through the flagship's hull at specific points identified from the intelligence Summers and Dias had brought back. On the flagship's bridge, War Master Thraz received increasingly desperate reports from across his fleet. 30% of our ships have lost power. Ground forces are in disarray. We have hull breaches on multiple decks. For the first time in his long military career, Thraz felt something new. Fear. The battle net, normally organized and disciplined, now filled with confusion and requests for retreat. "This is impossible," he growled. "They are just humans." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, scales pale with stress. "Humans have boarded the flagship. They're headed for the bridge." In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Grant watched the battle unfold exactly as they had planned. "They expected us to defend," she said quietly to Hudson. They never thought we would turn their own attack into our counteroffensive. Hudson nodded. Pride. That was their weakness all along. As Bailey's boarding team fought their way toward the Krellin Command Center, Grant allowed herself a small smile. The real battle begins now. Captain Chris Bailey led his boarding team through the corridors of the Krellin flagship. They moved quickly, using the tactics Colonel Winters had drilled into them. Each team member knew exactly what to do. "Bridge is 2 levels up," Bailey said, checking the ship schematic on his wrist display. "They've sealed the main access." "Not a problem," replied his engineer, attaching a small device to a nearby wall panel. The device interfaced with the Krellin systems, using Dr. Wright's reverse-engineered technology to override the ship's controls. A hidden door slid open, revealing a maintenance shaft. "The back way in," Bailey said with a smile. On the bridge, War Master Thraz prepared for a final stand. Most of his fleet was disabled or retreating. The ground forces on the moon were in chaos. Now humans were inside his own ship. "Seal all approaches to the bridge," he ordered. "Kill any human who gets through." His remaining officers moved to defensive positions, weapons ready. They were Krellins, the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They would not be defeated by primitive humans. Suddenly, the floor vents in the bridge burst open. Smoke grenades filled the air with thick clouds that blocked the Krellins' vision, but not their human attackers' special visors. Bailey's team swarmed onto the bridge from directions the Krellins never thought to guard. The fighting was short but fierce. The humans didn't fight with honor or follow any rules of combat. They used stun weapons, flash grenades, and tactics that confused and separated the Krellin defenders. Soon, Bailey stood face to face with War Master Thraz, the last Krellin standing on the bridge. "Surrender," Bailey said, his weapon aimed at the alien commander. Thraz looked at the human with rage and confusion. Bailey's uniform was torn, blood seeping from wounds on his arm and face, yet he stood tall, seemingly unaffected by injuries that would have stopped a Krellin warrior. "You should be broken by now," Thraz growled. Bailey smiled, despite the pain from his wounds. "That's the thing you never understood about humans. We don't break easily, and when we do, we become something even more dangerous." Thraz looked around at his defeated crew, his disabled ship, his scattered fleet. With great reluctance, he lowered his weapon. "I surrender." Within hours, the news spread throughout the remaining Krellin forces. Their war master had surrendered. Their greatest fleet was defeated. The supposedly weak humans had done what no species had managed in centuries of Krellin conquests. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Grant received the official surrender from Thraz himself. "You have 2 choices," Grant told the Krellin commander. "Retreat from our solar system and never return, or face complete destruction." Thraz, his scales pale with humiliation, nodded slowly. "We will retreat." As the damaged Krellin ships limped away from Earth, the High Command received Thraz's comprehensive report on human capabilities. The final assessment was clear: humans. Deceptively fragile in physical form, but possessing unmatched adaptability, unpredictability, and a disturbing ability to weaponize anything, including their own apparent weaknesses. Classification: extremely dangerous. Recommendation: avoid further engagement at all costs. 2 weeks later, Admiral Grant stood with her team on the observation deck of Earth's orbital station. The last Krellin ship was just a tiny dot disappearing into deep space. "We did it," Hudson said quietly. "We saved Earth." "For now," Grant replied. She turned to face her team: Hudson, Dr. Penn, Agent Reyes, Commander Miller, Dr. Wright, Colonel Winters, and Captain Bailey. All of them had been essential to humanity's victory. "They'll be back," Grant continued, "or someone else will come. Now that we've announced ourselves to the galaxy, others will take notice." "Are you worried?" asked Dr. Penn. Grant shook her head. "No, because now we know something important about ourselves. When pushed to the edge, humanity doesn't just survive. We adapt, we overcome, we emerge stronger. She looked out at the stars, countless points of light representing unknown worlds and species. We need to be ready for whatever's out there. And thanks to all of you, we will be. As the team dispersed to begin their new assignments, Grant remained at the window. The Krellans had come expecting easy prey and found instead a species more dangerous than they could have imagined. It would not be the last time humanity would surprise the galaxy. Earth was not just another world to be conquered. It was home to humans, adaptable, unpredictable, and far more dangerous than expected.